Hello, I'm August Keller, and this is my review of Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. Frozen Empire chooses quantity over quality. It's overstuffed with excessive protagonists, exposition dumps, a convoluted plot, and unclear rules. There's just too much going on. Almost nothing is developed, and there is an arc that is completed, but that arc feels pretty thin, almost borderline unearned. It's thinly earned. It has the makings of themes, relationships, internal conflicts, but all of that is drowned out by these stagnant side characters, needless nostalgia bait, and these muddled threads. There's spotty humor. Sometimes it works, sometimes it undermines what it's trying to do, sometimes it just kind of misses. The dialogue is also pretty inconsistent. A lot of it feels a little unnatural. The threats are generic. That's a lot of that is because the internal conflicts struggle to connect. So it's just an external conflict, and an external conflict on its own can get really generic, especially when it's following a formula set in place by a franchise. And the drama is minimal. There's almost no falling action. That's a pretty telltale sign. Once the climax over and the movie just kind of ends immediately, it's because they have no emotional loose ends to tie up and resolve. It's all just the external conflict's over, so the movie's over now, pretty much. I mean, they tie off a little bit, but again, it's minimal. I think the acting is pretty mixed. A few of them show some sparks. I think everyone's kind of cramped into one note, and they just can't really do much. They try, but they can only do so much when the material only gives them one note to play. Ultimately, Ghostbusters Frozen Empire buries adequate ideas. There's an arc there. There's internal conflicts there. There's like the ingredients, the beginnings of all that. But the script can't make up its mind about what it's trying to do. It's throwing too much in there, and it doesn't really land anything. So it starts off basic and it gets watered down from there. So pretty underwhelming, I would say, emotionally and dramatically. Technically, I think it's similarly disjointed. The direction, I think, really suffers from just too many tones. It's sci-fi, it's horror, it's comedy, it's coming of age, and some action too. So all of that is just mixing, and none of it gets to breathe, and it's all just kind of everywhere all at once, and it devolves into just kind of bland nothingness and kind of just starts to feel like just a product. It's a sequel motivated more by needing to exist for money than because it has a story it wants to say. It really comes across in the tone being all over the place. But I don't think it's really going to connect with anyone because it's not picking a lane. I think the imagery, the cinematography is also pretty just kind of a wash. It shows good motion. There's a oneer in there that's pretty impressive. There's some interesting framing here and there. There's like maybe 4 or 5 shots that really stand out. But a lot of it is pretty basic. The composition is basic. There's no meaning. There's not a lot of emotion built into any image because there's not a lot of emotions to begin with, but the imagery doesn't really heighten anything. It just kind of looks cool in a superficial sense at times, but even then it's not so much. It's pretty basic, even from a superficial standpoint. And honestly, it gets kind of drab, I think. The climax is kind of gray and blue, and it's kind of every climax you've ever seen from a franchise movie, every generic one anyways. I think the editing is another kind of weak point because the movie is all over the place. That really comes across in the editing. There's really kind of almost no momentum. I would say it's just kind of stuff happening, and whenever you kind of maybe would start to feel emotionally invested, it's moving on to a completely unrelated thread, and just there's just too much going on for you to ever really feel one thing actually leading to the next thing. Even the climax, when it all comes together, it's kind of like it's still kind of muddled. So the pacing is clunky, and structurally, I think it's uneven. Like I said, there's minimal falling action. I can't even really say if there's a first act, a second act, and a third act. I mean, it's kind of there. It's there. I don't think it's like it's completely falling apart, but it just kind of like blandly stumbles into each act. There's not like a definitive turning point necessarily. It's just happening. It's not tight. The sound, I think, is a strength. There's a lot of genre elements. There's horror, sci-fi, action, and there is silence used for emotional beats. When they pull down the sound, that's always a good move. And there's emphasis where they heighten the importance of something through the sound it makes. But it's hard for me to really say the sound is impactful because it's just kind of, it's reaching through this fog. It can't connect emotionally because there's just so much going on that it's hard for the sound to really land because the emotions are just too muddled. So the sound is good on a superficial level, but ultimately kind of feels like it's spinning its wheels. I think the music and the production design are both kind of similar, actually. They either give you tired iconography, like recognizable iconic things, like the melodies of the music, or the costumes that you know, but we've seen it so many times, and it's been in so many different contexts now that it's losing its impact. And it's not special when it's in service of a story that no one is particularly passionate about. In addition to that, the new additions they make, the new music, the new designs, they're pretty forgettable and generic. I don't think anyone's going to remember the villain from this movie. He looks like, I don't know, something from a Goosebumps movie. I mean, sure, it's not bad. It's just underwhelming. The cast is probably the strength of this film, but unfortunately, they're underutilized. There's fame here, of course. There's cameos, and the cameos, I would say, are not shameless. They're actually kind of characters. Not all of them, but some of them. There's talent, and there's fit. I think there's good fit. I think Paul Rudd this is a good kind of movie for him. Carrie Coon, this was a good role for her if she had an opportunity to actually do something with it. But all these actors, all this talent, all this fit, all this fame, they're just kind of there. I mean, Finn Wolfhard, he could just not be in the movie. He has nothing to do. He's probably the best example of somebody having nothing to do, but almost everyone has nothing to do. Mckenna Grace is probably the one with the most to do, and even she is underdeveloped, unfortunately. The special effects, for the most part, I was on board. They use some old school techniques here and there, and for the most part, it's under control and even kind of tasteful, but towards the end, it does become overdone and kind of loses itself to kind of a schlocky digital fiesta. I wish they would dial it down a little bit, use a little more practical effects, especially in the climax, because that's when it's most important for it to feel tangible and real so that we care. And I think it kind of loses it at the end. It's fine. The effects are fine. They're pretty good. Objectively, it's a lot of effects, and objectively, they're well done enough. But I think they were overused in the end. Overall, I think Frozen Empire, like if you could trim it down to the best bits and really expand on that, cut out all the extra fat, I think there's something passable, decent there, but that's undermined by all this franchising clutter and general lack of focus. I wasn't mad at it. I wasn't actively angry. I thought it was kind of boring, kind of whatever. I was neutral for the most part. It's not the kind of movie that I'm actively saying don't watch, but I'm definitely not saying to watch it. I wouldn't recommend it, and I almost would not recommend it. I kind of want to not recommend it. But if you want to see it, if you like this franchise, if you're okay with the sequels, go for it. If it looks like just another unnecessary sequel, it is. It's just not a very good movie. It just was too unfocused. That's really the fatal flaw. So yeah, that's about all I have to say about that. If you like what I'm doing here, please feel free to like and subscribe or leave a comment. All of that really helps. Also, I have an Instagram that's linked in the description. I recommend checking that out if you're interested in more content. I have a lot more reviews there, polls, trivia. So if you want more of what I'm doing, that's a good place to go. Support there is appreciated as well. But at the very least, I appreciate you watching this video. It means a lot to me. I thank you for your support just doing that. Okay, I'll see you around.